Live now.
Hello, welcome to Node Foundation TSC meeting for, what is this, Thursday, the 15th of December, 2016. And we're going to get straight into it and make sure I've got the right document for a start. There we go. Review of previous meeting. We continue to discuss the NVM issue, which is number 96. That's been delegated to a version management discussion group, and they are defining strategy for us. And we'll hopefully have a little bit of an update on that this week. We authorized utilization of travel fund for collaborators and TSC and CTC members who could come to Node Interactive, and we had a bunch of people that we authorized travel for. We were going to be following up on that to make sure people get reimbursement. We chat about folding the TSC into the CTC. We ended up closing that one for lack of having a justification. Even though we can probably come up with some, nobody's actually making a case that really wants to do it, that is outlining a clear case for doing it. So for now, we're going to go ahead and make sure that the groups operate according to how they should, and if we need to fold them in the future, then somebody can make a case for that, and we'll do that. But for now, we're going to continue with them separate. We looked at defining node core, issue number 144. I presented that to the board a couple of weeks ago, and they're happy with that, and so we're ready to close that one. I just haven't done the final pieces. And we skipped over the revised membership rules that James was proposing. Okay, so getting into the meeting today, we have a request to authorize travel funds for Anna Henningsen to go to TC39. This is issue number 176 in the TSC repo. Anna has been invited to attend the TC39 meeting in January, and is looking for travel fund authorization up to $3,000 to get from Europe to wherever it is in the US this is happening. So there's been a bit of discussion.
I think the next one's in the Bay Area, if I recall.
Right, it's at PayPal in San Jose, keine Ahnung. No idea. Jose, okay.
Yep. So there's been mostly positive. There's been a little bit of concern about the distance to travel from Ben.
Ben is worried about climate change.
Yes. But I think like the feel of the CTC in particular is that having more node representation on TC39, or at least presence, is a positive thing. So I'm all for this. Is there anyone that has a negative here?
No. Do we know what their, like, there's an agenda somewhere. I always forget where it is. I'm looking on the TC39 repo now. It would definitely, however, be probably more productive to be up to speed with some of those conversations before going into them in person.
Yep. I mean, it's going to change a lot though before April. I mean, but yeah, probably like a month before you want to dig into it a bit.
Well, this is for January.
Oh,
Right.
for the January meeting. Oh, okay. I totally forgot about that one.
Is there something in specific that who invited you again? Who is that?
So as I mentioned in the issue, I was originally approached by James Kyle.
Right.
So,
Did they talk to something to discuss there about being there in specific?
You mean specific topics for which you
Yeah.
wanted me to know?
Okay.
Like, as I mentioned, the primary motivation is, as I've put it, broadening the range of backgrounds that
Right.
people have.
Right.
Mhm. I'll also say that like the more kind of purely community representation that we have, like not from companies, is really helps as well.
Yeah.
Because we do have more people kind of showing up on a regular basis, but they're also representing large companies. So this is just generally kind of good. I'll also say that, you know, like one of the reasons why they hand out these invites is that there's not a lot of people that can really like be effective in the room. And so when people show an interest and have like a, you know, good expertise that they don't have yet in there, they tend to send out an invite, get them in, you know, as first just as a guest, and then see kind of how well it goes, and then, you know, try to get them there on a more permanent basis, if they're really effective. So because they're just, I mean, they're really starved for people there that can be effective. It's a hard room to be in.
Right. Okay. Well, do you
So
feel
is
good
James
about getting
Kyle
them?
on TC39? Is he representing Facebook?
He wasn't there at my meeting. There was somebody else from Facebook. Facebook is a member. He
Okay.
wasn't there.
Yeah, I didn't think he was a member.
If I had to guess, I would say that he probably doesn't go because he's more effective as a developer than as, like, you know, in a political body.
Yeah. So my only question for you, Anna, is: are you sure you have the stomach for this? Because it's you know, I kind of pity everyone that gets involved in that kind of discussion.
So,
You'll
like,
find out, I guess.
if the question is whether I'm fine doing like that kind of political stuff or possibly political stuff, I guess so. Yeah.
Like, it'd be interesting to see how you go.
I'll also say that this gets a little bit easier the more people that we have in the room from Node. Like, I think that Bradley was probably burning out being the only person kind of holding it down. And it's just a lot easier when you have other people there that can also kind of back up what you're saying and help out.
Okay, so we have a bunch of +1s in that thing. I haven't tallied them up, but I'm pretty sure we are we're close to having enough. But instead of doing a vote here in person, can you please do a +1 in that issue if you're on the TSC, or a -1 or an abstain? Just register something in there, and then we can get that authorized. And yeah, good luck on that, Anna. I look forward to hearing how it goes. The next one is issue number 175, which is formation of a security working group. So security working group was kicked off at Node Interactive North America 16, with particularly instigated by the addition of the Node Security Project to the Node Foundation. So the security working group will have a relatively broad remit of things to do, not just the Node Security Project work, but it won't be responsible for handling the private security stuff. That's still in the domain of the CTC. So this is going to be a policy and an ecosystem group. William, what's the process here for getting this ratified?
So I put this on the agenda because I want to get some clarity on exactly what we're trying to achieve. Because what I'm understanding so far is that the board has decided that the Node Security Project is now part of the foundation. That's been a real thing that's happened. And so it's kind of being turned over now to the technical side. And the way I look at it and the way I hear this, that sounds like a new top level project to me. And if it's not, then somehow this other project that's brought in is now merging into the core top level project or something. So that's really kind of this hazy area. But if it is a new top level project, that means it needs a technical committee, just like core has a technical committee. it could fall under the TSC, I suppose, but yeah, it's something that needs to be discussed. Now, it seems almost separate that there's also this security working group, separate but related, that we're all discussing about forming, and there's a lot of momentum running forward, talking about this working group and what it does and its roles and responsibilities, and it almost seems to me like this node security project is kind of being forgotten in that push forward. That's kind of where this all started from. So
I think
I
there's
feel like things are connected.
I'll add a little bit to that in that, Sam's been asking me, and he asked me specifically to ask in this call, what we really need is the bridge between what the discussions that have gone on between Adam and the foundation, and
Right.
him at least as the bridge into that work group. Because I know in the discussion at the collaborator summit, we didn't have anybody in the room who could speak to that, so we didn't really focus on that. And Sam has reached out to Adam to start the engagement, but I think what he needs is, either whether it's Michael or Rod or whoever it's been who's had the discussions and negotiations with him so far, he needs to get together with them to really understand what we've already agreed, not agreed, what the foundation, whoever's been in those negotiations, what their idea of what they wanted to accomplish was, so we can bring that all back to the first meeting. And like you said, make sure that that is one of the central focuses of that group as it gets ramped up.
So I can speak to that. So this is what we've basically agreed to, is that the foundation is going to take over responsibility for vetting vulnerabilities that come for the Node.js ecosystem. Okay, so more than just core, essentially. We're taking responsibility for vetting those for a single point to disclose those vulnerabilities, for vetting them, and then for maintaining the data and the policy around the data that people use for understanding those disclosures. Now, there's some technical limitations to how we have to do that because of this unified entry point. So I think that all of us sort of agreed that there still needs to be a separate group that is the Node core security group that vets Node's core vulnerabilities. I think there's also somewhat broad agreement that we don't want to disclose to this broader group that's vetting all of the vulnerabilities for the entire ecosystem all of these Node core vulnerabilities early on as well. It would actually be ideal if we could keep those just in that smaller group. So because of that, because of that technical limitation, I think that this funnel, this entry point with like security@nodejs.org and this sort of like unified disclosure endpoint, it has to be managed by the core group just so that they can say, is this a core vulnerability or not? And then if it's not, quickly hand it over to the group that's vetting the ecosystem stuff. The ecosystem vulnerability vetting does need to be a separate group though, because we want to get broader participation that are responsible for more than just the core stuff. And honestly, I think that people like Adam and other people are going to be really involved in who is participating in this broader group, and the core the CTC essentially really needs to manage who is vetting core vulnerabilities and core security.
So the way that I had envisaged this working out was that this new group wouldn't necessarily be a working group immediately, but it would be more like a discussion group to figure out how to proceed. So that the first task of this group is to figure out what its scope of responsibility, well, what its responsibilities are, what its tasks are, and how to ease in the Node security project into the work we do in the Node.js org. So that's their task, and then come back to us with the proposal for how to move forward, and whether they want to be a working group, whether they want to be something else, and how the Node security project is going to get integrated.
Well, I think one of the things that they're coming back with though is that because they have this dependency on the existing security work, it's kind of hard for them to do that in isolation.
Well, no, I think it sounds to me like they're coming back wanting more context, and so the context you've just provided is important there, Michael, because you've been the connection point between Node security project and the foundation. So giving them that context about what has been promised, what has been said, is very helpful. But I think simply organising a meeting and getting Adam involved in that is going to, solve pretty
Right,
much
so
all of this.
that is underway. I think, Sam's scheduling the meeting for next week. He's got some emails back and forth with Adam, and Adam's giving him his perspective of what's coming in. But I still think that maybe, Michael, if you could catch up with Sam for a short conversation, that would help him out in terms of feeling like he has whatever context there is to have, right?
Sure, I can do that. Also, I mean, I'm drowning in email, but if I can be in those early meetings, that would also probably help. I think.
Yeah,
Also,
I agree. It's next week, and I'm not going to be around, but there's an issue in that repo that you can grab and make sure you can.
Okay. Additionally, I'd just say to William's point about it eventually being a top level project, like we can have top level working groups, and I do agree that the group that is vetting ecosystem vulnerabilities and publishing that data should probably exist directly under the TSC, not under the CTC. Like that would be my recommendation, but obviously they're going to come back with whatever. So
I agree. But yeah, that's right. I think this group needs to come up with their own proposal about how they relate and where they fit. But I have this idea in my head that seems to make sense, but they're welcome to come up with something else.
Yeah, I think it's useful to communicate that idea as a starting point, and then, like you said, they can take that or go in whatever direction.
Yeah, I haven't been involved in that meeting planning. I probably should too.
Yeah, again, I think sort of bridging the gap would be good, because that's I'm kind of getting the feeling from Sam. He's like, okay, there's got to be more context. I don't know what it is.
I know. We started this with minimal context, really. So yeah. Oh, so this meeting next week was going to be in this same time slot. Is that right? From your understanding,
Michael? Scheduling it for the alternate weeks from this one.
Fantastic. That's easy. Okay. So I
just a question. So sometimes it's come up where we've had to shift this meeting a week in between. What happens then?
I think we'll just have to cope in terms of, I don't know if all of us will necessarily be there. Need to be at both of them, right?
Yeah. Okay.
Just have to choose priorities. And I mean, this is for their first meeting. That's not saying that it's going to be their regular meeting or that they're even going to do it bi-weekly. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think that they'll probably discuss it. It'll be discussed at the first meeting what makes sense. The proposal was like to do it every at least to start with every other week, because more frequent, and then tail off to some other frequency, which would be once a month or whatever makes sense. But yeah, depending on who shows up, you're right. It could just be maybe there'll be a whole new time chosen.
Yeah. Michael, encourage Sam to reach out directly to Michael or me if he needs to have those conversations.
I have done that as well, so I'm just trying to. If you both try and reach out, I'm trying to hope that maximizes the chances.
Yeah.
I'll tell him that.
The main answer you can give to him is that Michael has all the context with regard to, well, Michael and Adam have the context with regard to Net Security Project, and I was responsible for everything else, or proposing everything else. So I'm not sure how much else I can provide other than what I've done on the repo so far.
Yeah, I think I mostly pointed him at Michael as the one who probably had the most context in terms of foundation discussions and agreements and whatever. So. Having come out of this, I'll let them know that we talked about it and confirm that you two, as you've just outlined, are the right people to follow up with, and that also hopefully you're going to try and make the meeting too. So.
Okay. So moving along, please stop me if you've got anything to hold that up. But the next one is issue number 174, which is copyright. And restoring the joint copyright headers. So I made a proposal in that issue about getting the having a briefing for the CTC so that they can be comfortable with this. But Michael, you've responded there. I haven't had time to read yours since I've got up, so maybe you can fill us in on current status of that.
Of which one? Sorry.
This is the joint copyright headers. You responded to my...
Yeah, we like I'm just trying to understand why we are either ignoring the legal advice of the people that we pay for legal advice, or otherwise requiring that they basically educate every contributor on the law before we take this change. Like we continually delegate technical tasks to people with that technical expertise, and I don't know why we can't delegate this legal expertise to our own lawyers that we pay.
Because it's not something we've been practiced at. So if that's the way it's got to work, which is you're probably right, then it's something we need to educate ourselves about. That this is a process that is appropriate. We have legal expertise, and so yeah. So a bit of patience. I can understand your frustration here, given that you've done most of the interacting on the legal side of this. But this is a totally new experience for most people here, to have legal advice which we are supposed to trust, because in the past we've had legal advice from lots of third parties that we've had to try and juggle. And you can even see in that thread there's more legal advice being thrown in. So it's a totally new experience of saying here's a legal party that is on our side that we should trust. So that's what obviously we need to work on.
Also, like we also have to set expectations here that we can't get binding legal advice in public. Like we can't. Like your conversation with your lawyer needs to be a private conversation. Like so there's some limitations in what we can kind of post publicly about this kind of stuff. There are workarounds, but they kind of take quite a bit longer. And in fact, we have one available, right? Like, so we asked for legal advice on which licenses to use and how to properly denote which license that we have. And the board produced a document that our lawyers signed off on that is now public. But we don't. But for things like this that are very specific to us violating the terms of the license and then being asked relatively politely to add it back, that kind of like the kind of legal advice that we get about that needs to remain private, which is one of the kind of more difficult and frustrating bits about this. Also, one thing that I'll point out as well is that the TSC has a lot of autonomy, but they don't have autonomy over legal matters. Like that, it's spelled out pretty clearly in the charter that the foundation and the board are still responsible for the legal side of things. And that makes sense because the board is actually responsible legally for the project, and any legal risk that the contributors decide to take on, the board is actually ultimately responsible for. So yeah, that's all I really have to say.
James, you on the call?
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah, for me, I mean, it is definitely. I mean, it's just something we have to do. For me, it's just a matter of the details, exactly which files need to be touched, and exactly how, and I can update the PR accordingly. I think the conversation we had yesterday on the CTC call, we can kind of clarify things. I just haven't had the opportunity to actually get that PR update, which I'll be doing by tomorrow. I think at this point, decision's pretty much made. We just have to finalize the details of the PR and land it.
Okay, so in the process of landing, like given that what Michael's saying about how we have to respect the legal input, it's important for us to not confuse questions with people holding up. So let's not ram it through, but actually answer questions and concerns, because otherwise it's not going to build much trust if we just ignore people's concerns, because there are legitimate questions. I have similar questions that are being asked, and getting reasonable answers is a reasonable thing.
One thing that I'm planning on doing along with this Michael, just as a heads up for you,
Mhm.
I'm going to be opening a second PR. To go along with the first one that restores it. The second one is going to introduce the reduced version of the header. That one we will need to go back to Joanne and others to make sure that they approve of it before we land it. That's the second step that we've been talking about.
So I would say so the process wouldn't be so direct to Joanne on that. The process actually needs to be just like I love the idea of this PR, by the way. Thank you. So file the PR and then Rod will send a request to the board to send it to the legal committee, and the legal committee will have to figure out who we need to get input from, because it may actually be that we need input from or sign off from a couple like primary contributors to some of those files and things like in addition to Joanne. So we need to like allow them to kind of vet that.
So I will be providing the updated PR tomorrow that restores the original headers just to the files that are still existing from the original modification. Okay? And then a second PR that reduces those headers down to the smaller version, and then go from there. Before we can land either PR, we'll have to get the legal committee to review it and say, okay, yeah, that looks good. That meets the requirement or not. Okay.
Sounds good.
One thing that I'll say, when you do that PR, you're going to add the reduced line to all of the files, right? Not just the files with the join stuff in it, right?
Yep.
Cool. Okay, great.
And to be specific, all JS files, all C, all H, the header files. Everything is not a fixture file, a source file that we'll have it.
And just to clarify, when you say the shortened license, you mean the SPDX? We're switching using SPDX identifiers throughout?
Yeah, SPDX, a copyright statement, and the URL of our license file.
Gotcha.
Okay. Moving on. Issue number 147, which was travel fund. This is on the agenda simply because I don't believe we followed up with the people that we authorized funding for. And Michael, I wanted to get a verification of the process here. Do we just need to provide you with a list of people that we authorized and then point them to you?
No, so there's a Google Doc that I sent around in a prior one of these threads that essentially it's just like a standard expense reimbursement Google Doc like pulled off the internet, but they just need to send that to ap@linuxfoundation.org and CC me on it.
Right.
Yep. And we noted this process a couple other places as well.
Yeah, no, sorry.
I wonder if we haven't, if it never made it into the document about it though. So maybe we need to update that with what we've said in other threads or something like that.
Possibly. Yeah. We didn't put it in there. Okay. I'll try and find that other document link.
Was that meant to be public?
What?
I think it was just a template, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, the Google Doc is literally a template. It's just like a standard expense reimbursement form. And then the reason that you have to CC me on it is because I have to tell the AP people that, yes, this is an approved expense. So it can't really be used by some rando because I would go, who the hell is this person?
Cool. Yeah, I just misunderstood. Thanks.
So it's not. We didn't note that in the previous meeting minutes. Do you happen to have it that link handy? Because I recall it, but I never opened it, so it's not in my history.
Yeah, let me look. I'll have to look through some of the issues to find it.
Oh, you think it's on GitHub? Okay.
Yeah, it's in a GitHub issue somewhere. I'll find it.
Also, if anybody has existing like invoicing software, you can just use that to send your invoice to ap@linuxfoundation.org as well.
Yeah. So if you send an invoice, they may come back and say, "Where is the contract agreement with this vendor?"
Okay.
Yeah. So it's specific to being a reimbursement, essentially. Like that's why we don't, and then we won't ask for things like that, basically. Also, if it's a stipend, we handle it a little bit differently. But these aren't stipends, so that's fine.
Somewhat related, William had brought this up in one of the issues somewhere about how we have the member travel flow. It actually has some restrictions on who we're allowed to give it to. Is that something we wanted to discuss here, or should we table that till the future meeting?
Sorry, what was the question?
So we have a member travel fund document already. It's in the TSC repo. It's just member-travel-fund.md. And there's some restrictions placed on who can apply for this. And one of the restrictions is actually pretty heavy, and it's implied that we may not actually have been following that properly. I don't know, William, do you want to add to that, Amy? I mean, I can also talk to it as well.
I mean, you kind of just said it. Yeah, the document is there. It's in the board minutes that document was approved. And it has those restrictions, which really hadn't been called out. And I don't really think we want to keep those restrictions because that's really not how we've been using it. It says that you must be going to speak at a conference, and it must be for the approved slides that are listed there.
That's a different fund.
Well,
Actually,
no,
it's the same fund.
it's just that we never ended up using it that way, so we're repurposing it.
Yeah. So just to be clear, the way that we passed this is that we got an allocation for a fund that the TSC would manage. What the board passed was a very minimal requirement on how it can be used, and these things that you're talking about aren't in the what the board approved. The board basically said that the TSC will manage the process for giving out this money, and here's the initial version of that. But we separated those specifically so that the TSC could continue to iterate on the process and kind of use the fund more or less at will. So we're not technically violating like the board agreement and all the financing stuff because the TSC did approve all these people even though it's outside of the policy. But the TSC probably does want to go in and now modify the policy to match what we actually use it for. Just to give some context, those restrictions were placed on the fund because the initial vision of the fund was that we would end up sending people to random conferences to talk about the foundation. And because that opens up so many people being able to just request money from us, we wanted to put a couple restrictions on it in order to manage it. That's not how we're using it anymore, so we should just change the process to something that fits more how you're using it now.
Yeah, and that was the comment that I had left there, like, can we get this updated? That's all. But the board minutes actually say it's 75,000, not 45,000. So I'm not sure the discrepancy there.
We altered the allocation later. So that was the allocation that we had in 2015. And because there was only like a couple months left in the year, it was really small. When we did the 2016 budgeting, we just increased the allocation to the same line item.
So what we need to do is take that document and liberalize it and make it so that it's much more open to use and it can just be approved by the TSC.
Yes, but one thing that should concern us that we really need to think on, we reduced the allocation quite a bit this year for 2017 because we weren't using it as much and because we wanted to essentially just come back to the board to refresh it if we run out of it. Mm-hmm. So we're just going to need to keep an eye on how much gets spent, and then have the TSC request more money from the board when it's nearing running out.
Should we keep track of that?
Yes, that would be ideal. I mean, we're going to keep track of it at a finance level in audit and finance, but like that's a month or two after the expenses go through, we actually kind of like tally all of that up. So, you know, like for instance, Anna's asking for up to 3,000, but she's probably, you know, she's going to file expense reimbursements for her flight and hotel, and it may come in under that. So, you know, I would just keep track of like, oh, we've approved 3,000, we approve up to 1,000 for the next person. And once you hit the limit, just go straight to the board and say, hey, we need more money. We've allocated to this.
This doesn't seem like a realistic solution to have just someone here keep track of it. And unfortunately, this is not something I can automate with the bot.
We could make it part of our process where we could have a spreadsheet, and then so whenever somebody gets approved for travel funds, we say this is how you submit them, and as part of that process, you've got to go to this Google spreadsheet or this Google form and fill it in, and it'll go onto our spreadsheet. So we could just make it.
How about a document?
How about why don't we just make the process for requesting funds a pull request rather than an issue, and they can insert their name into the document, and then we have a running list of how much we've allocated and what it's been for.
I like this.
That's good.
Yep.
That's a very GitHub solution. Does somebody want to volunteer to kick that off, to kick off a
Okay, who's
file
gonna write this up?
to edit that travel fund document and start it off? I can follow up with the people that we have approved funds for and give them that process, but I'm not gonna get to that doc.
Yeah, I was going to say it might be helpful for someone who needs to file for reimbursement to be able to kick this off.
Anna, would you like to kick it off?
Yeah, I guess I could do that. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So I think just a simple markdown table, I guess.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, and somebody needs to propose a simplification and adjustment to that travel fund doc. I don't know if that's highly critical right now, but it needs to get done. So I'll just throw that out there and suggest that I'm probably not going to get that done. So actually, let's leave this issue on the agenda, and if it comes around next week, then we'll make sure that somebody takes that task.
And I had already removed the issue from the agenda. Okay, adding it back.
Just so it doesn't get forgotten.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, I'd like to take it on. Just like it's not good timing for me right now. I've got work deadlines, stuff like that, so I can't get to it now. But if we can, kind of remind me again in like 2 weeks or whatever, I could probably take it on then.
Okay. Yeah, 2 weeks. It's going to be Christmas, isn't it? Have to be careful about that.
4 weeks then.
Scope of responsibility, issue number 144. This is our recurring one. As I said in the issue for this meeting, that's pretty much done. I just haven't finished the last pieces of it. We had board approval. Well, no, actually, we didn't go seeking approval. We went seeking input and to get their feedback, and they were positive. And the only thing that they thought was missing was the possibility of a project coming in. Having been instigated by the board rather than us instigating bringing a project in. So that's the only thing that's missing from there that we probably want to put in. So I'll get that done, just get some feedback on that, and then we'll get it merged. And then we're done, and we can move on to the next thing, which is defining how our membership works out, which should flow from the changes we've made here. It should be fairly obvious how to do membership from there, because I think we've defined quite a lot in those changes. Next one is 142, revised membership rules. James, do you want to proceed with this, or do you want to punt this again?
I still have an edit pending to that doc that hasn't been addressed.
Yeah, sorry, no, I know that, Jeremiah. Which one are we talking about? The 142 or mine?
James's.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah,
Okay.
I haven't had any opportunity to actually look at those. I was going to revisit it after the new year.
Okay. Let's punt then.
Jeremiah,
And
I'm not ignoring your edits. I'm just haven't had a chance to look at them.
And lastly, version management. So this is under the issue 96, which was looking at bringing an NVM into the foundation. We punted strategy discussion off to a new discussion group, and requesting that they tell us, recommend to us how to proceed with this whole area. Is there anyone here that can give us a quick summary of there was a meeting, I think, in-person meeting at Node Interactive?
Yeah, I can report on that, and I pasted into the notes the notes from that meeting. So if you look at the very bottom there, it actually says, "What about MVM being in the foundation?" Essentially, the conclusion was that that group should focus first on conventions and standards for the paths and mechanisms used by Node by default. And if and when those kinds of things are ironed out, then we could potentially choose a specific version manager to bring in. But we didn't want to bring in anything that wasn't going to be officially supported or officially in line. There was a lot of clarification there. Actually, Michael can kind of talk to it. That we can only take in projects that are aligned and supported by our group. We can't just take in projects to give them a place to live. So therefore, we can't bring in NVM till we know it's aligned with the standards and expectations and needs of the project, and that it could be, something that we could officially support.
Okay, I actually like those notes down the bottom there. The process of deciding how to move forward. That it should be, we can't bring them all in, so we probably should just bring one in if we bring one at all. But then deciding what to bring in means deciding what we want. So that's the first step.
Probably the biggest thing that we all realized in that conversation was we can't bring them all in. And Jordan's not on the call, but I think that was his understanding and kind of how we portrayed things a year ago, that almost anything could come in and we would give it a home. But that's changed, and it's, if you want to be at an umbrella foundation, then the JavaScript Foundation is more suited for that.
Okay.
Yeah, that was pretty much the consensus from there, is that if MVM needed or wanted to move into a foundation in the short term, the JS Foundation would be a better place from that group's perspective.
It's great. This is good progress. Okay, we look forward to hearing more when that group moves forward. Is there another meeting planned, or is there progress planned there?
That I don't know. I think it's been a little quiet this month. So since the
December stuff. Okay. Anything else before we move into public Q&A?
We could discuss whether we're going to have a meeting on the 29th.
Yeah.
Not a lot of feedback there.
I'm just looking at my calendar. I think I'd be okay with the 29th.
Yeah, me too.
It's detached enough from Christmas.
Yep,
Yeah,
I'm available as well. Look at my calendar.
And I am good. So.
Okay, well, let's say yes for now, and we may not get enough people to do anything meaningful, but we can try. Okay, so public Q&A time. Do we have people actually watching the live stream?
There's a couple of people, not too many people today.
Okay, well, if anyone has questions, please hit them up on YouTube or via one of the other ways to contact us. We'll wait a minute or so for feedback or the delay in the broadcast. So just while we're doing that, next meeting we've agreed on December 29th, there is a calendar that we will reiterate that William has been maintaining. So you can actually click on the link in the document and it will bring in events that are for meetings that are happening all across the org. And you can add it to your own calendar. You just have to find the link down the bottom right when you add it to your own calendar.
Is it fair to assume that once you've done that add once, any new items added to it show up as well?
Should do. So you will have difficulty if you have multiple, if you're signed into multiple Google accounts and the calendar you want to add it to is not the first one you logged into. You'll have to change the URL to make it work when you click that button. If anyone needs help with that, hit me up. But hopefully people will be able to figure that one out. Any questions coming in?
Not really. Thomas Watson says no questions from me. Just glad to listen in. That's the only thing that's in the chat other than my call for questions. So I think we're good.
Cool. Thanks, Thomas. thanks for having a listen. Okay. All good then. Let's close it up with 8 minutes to the top of the hour. Thanks for attending, everyone, and thanks for listening on the stream.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Yep. Well, do we have